Good morning, ladies and gentlemen in Great China, and good afternoon to our audience in Australia. Thank you for joining us in the webinar. I'm Lily Xia, Professor of Nursing at Flinders University, Australia. Can you please use the chat box to introduce your name and the organization you are associated with? Thank you. This is our 6th knowledge exchange webinar in our project entitled Strengthening Professional Collaboration in Dementia Caregiver Education and Research while the Prevention and Evaluation of the Eye Support Program in Australia and Great China. This project is funded by the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, Australian government. Flinders University is the lead organization in the project. We are very proud to work with our partners in Australia and Great China to deliver this very important program. Our partner organizations include the University of New South Wales, National Aging Research Institute, University of Wollongong, Pekin University, Xi'an Jiaotong University, Taipei Medical University, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the Caregiver Nursing College of Macau. We thank those partner organizations and our team members for the great contributions to the program. I'm very delighted to introduce today's presenter, Professor Timothy Kwok from the Department of Medicine Therapeutics, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Professor Kwok established the Jockey Club Centre for Positive Aging in Hong Kong and has been the director of the center since 2004. Under his leadership, the center provides comprehensive and patient-centered care for people with dementia. He will introduce more details to you about the center. In recent years, Professor Kwok has dedicated himself to enhancing public awareness of dementia and the development of the dementia-friendly city in Hong Kong. Professor Kwok has published over 200 research papers in international journals. He's the author of the book entitled Growing Old Gracefully. Please join me to warmly welcome Professor Kwok. I now hand over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lily, for your kind introduction. And it's a pleasure for me to be here and share with you our experience of developing dementia care in Hong Kong. I hope that our sharing will help you to have some inspirations for your future development in your localities. I'll divide up my talk into 4 parts. In the first part, I will talk about aging in Hong Kong in general, because it's relevant to the dementia care. And secondly, I move on to specific services for dementia in Hong Kong. Then I'll introduce our work of Jockey Club Centre for Positive Aging in the last 20 years or so. And lastly, I'll raise 2 very important issues about end-of-life care of people with dementia in Hong Kong. But I'm sure some of these issues may be relevant in your countries as well. Hong Kong, as well, you may be aware, the aging is a major issue in this part of the world, in Asia, and in Hong Kong in particular. We've been aging for the last 2 or 3 decades, and we are now around here. So about 15 to 16% of our population is above the age of 65. This figure is not that high when compared with European countries, and particularly with Japan. Japan at the moment has got a population, or 25% population of old people. But in the next 10 years or so, the rise of population aging will become more steep. So about 10 years later, the percentage of old people will increase to 25%, which is the equivalent of the figure of Japan at the moment. So in the next few years, it's 10 years or so, it will be very challenging for Hong Kong for population and aging. One of the reasons, there are many reasons for this rapid aging trend. A lot of it is basically demographics, but another underlying reason for this is the longevity that Hong Kong people enjoy. And it has the life expectancy has been rising for decades. So at the moment, for women is over 88 years, and for men, over 83 years. I believe that these figures are one of the best in the world, comparable or even better than those of Japan. So the best estimate of prevalence of dementia, it was based on the study that my psychogeriatric friends at my university, Chinese University of Hong Kong, they did a survey of 5,000 older people living in the community in 2006. And it was a random sample based on census. So at the moment, sort of since then, we have not been able to do similar study because of the privacy issue. So based on this, on the assessment, we can see that the dementia is really not a common condition below the age of 70, but after the age of 80, it rises very rapidly. So people around the age of 85 or more, 1/3 can be expected to have dementia. As I mentioned in my previous slide, aging, Hong Kong people enjoy very long lives. So that suggests that the number of people with dementia in the coming 10 years or so will increase very significantly. At the same time, there's a worrying trend of older people living alone. So you can see that in the future, at the moment, there are around 10% of older people living alone, but then it will rise to nearly 15%. This is very bad news when the population is aging and people are developing dementia. So all these people are likely to not to be doing well and not sort of surviving on their own properly, and they will end up in nursing homes. Before we talk about dementia care policy and services, we have to understand how old people live in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is renowned for its crowdiness, and the living space is really very limited. The current older population in Hong Kong, they tend to be less well off than the general population. That is because Hong Kong was poor 50 to 60 years ago. Hong Kong was actually very poor. So all these people, they retire and they go into old age without much saving. And that's why half of the older population in Hong Kong live in public housing or subsidized housing estates such as this. These housing estates, the design is very basic. It's designed to house as many people as possible. And the living space, this is the official figure, about 120 square feet per person. Okay, this is the official figure. And that is how government designs the public housing estates. But this is, in reality, the living space could even be smaller because the children may grow, they become sort of, when they get grown up, they get married and they have children. And if they are, have limited means, they might not be able to move out. So the units become more and more crowded with more grown-up children, bigger children, and grandchildren. So the average could even be less than that. But there are plus or minuses about living in very cramped condition. Well, the disadvantage is very obvious. If you are very cramped, you're more likely to have arguments, and if you have dementia, then even more arguments and more agitation. But there are some pluses as well. If your living environment is so cramped, you tend to go out, okay? So which is good for health. When you go out, you have more exercise, and also in the housing estates, the population is so big. Typical housing estate will have about 50,000 people living there. So that would be sufficient to sustain a reasonable size shopping center and an open market. So that allows old people to be self-sufficient. They don't really have to leave the housing estate for anything, okay? So that, and people indeed, for old people are there, they have been there for many years. So this is a very familiar environment. They don't really need to go out. So that would, reduce the chance of getting lost. And they will be able to maintain the daily living, ability of daily living a bit better. Another possible advantage of living in very cramped condition is that you're probably less likely to fall, because you don't really have to walk that much to get to where you want. And also, although we think that Hong Kong is made up of buildings and cement, but in fact, we have plenty of green space, especially in the new territories. We have, in proportion, the amount of green space is cities in the world. So there's good access, generally good access to public amenities and even green space. And in the summer months when Hong Kong becomes very hot, air conditioning is expensive. The old people tend to go to the shopping center for air conditioning, and they just wander around and and some of them take on a bus, which is air conditioned, and they just sit there all day. Okay, in Hong Kong, public transport is almost free, $2, and you just sit there, and you can spend the day sightseeing. So there are plus and minuses about living in Hong Kong. But a few years ago, we got a funding from the Hong Kong Jockey Club to survey the age friendliness of Hong Kong community. And so we interviewed nearly 10,000 subjects and did nearly 100 focus groups to find out how our old people feel about their lives. And it turns out that people were reasonably happy about our transportation. I must say that the public transport in Hong Kong is probably one of the best in the world. And you can get to almost anywhere, sort of through underground and train buses. And so probably because of that, the amount of social participation was felt to be satisfactory. 4 out of 6, full score of 6. Score relatively low with housing, which is not surprising because the space is so limited. Communities support, so health services, a bit low, relatively low. Okay. Now, let's move on to, so living in Hong Kong as an old person, has plus and minuses. They are not happy with the living space. They're not happy about the services they can get. from the government and concerned about healthcare, but the living environment is reasonable. In fact, although we say the public housing is very basic and not very basic and very limited in space, but nowadays with the very high property prices in Hong Kong, is seen by the young people to be a major privilege if you can get public housing, because the rent is really very low, around 2,000 Hong Kong dollars. And the average age, sort of a wage, is around 20,000 per month, even for working class people. So if you can get into public housing and you earn, a family earn 40,000 Hong Kong dollars per month, you have a reasonable standard of living. Whereas the really poor people can't even get to the public housing. Those are the ones who are really poor because they have to pay a lot of rent. Okay, so let's move on to the social services and the health services that old people can get in Hong Kong. Our general statement is that the government manage the expenditure in social care and healthcare by waiting lists. The good thing about these services is that they are very comprehensive, and once you can get to the service, they're almost free. So this is a big advantage, but the disadvantage is that because the government has to control public spending, because we have a very low tax rate, the maximum tax rate, income tax, is 15%. So one of the lowest in the world. I believe Macau is even better, they don't even pay tax. But anyway, to have a low tax rate, the government cannot afford to spend too much in public spending. And that's why they control it by limiting the supply. So the good thing is that you have good and free service once you get to it. But the bad thing is that you can't get to service because it's limited in supply. And the quality of the service cannot be very good as well, because if it is too good, then there is no room for the private sector. It's particularly the case for health services. If our public hospitals provide very good service, there's no incentive or any market for the private sector. Okay, let's talk about the social care first. We have the usual care services that most Western countries have, like home care, daycare, respite care, OH homes. They are funded by the government, social welfare department, but the government does not run them. The government gives out the money to the NGOs. We have a lot of charities of NGOs, and so they get the money from the government to run these services. As I mentioned, there's long waiting time. Now, let's talk about long-term care, OH home care, which is important because along the line of dementia, a lot of them will end up being in nursing homes at the end. Now, Hong Kong, we have actually a lot of OH home beds. In Hong Kong, we don't make a distinction between residential care or nursing home care, really. The OH homes, we have on average, one OH home bed per 11 older people in Hong Kong, which is a high ratio. But unfortunately, only a quarter of them are publicly funded. The publicly funded OH homes, the quality is reasonable. The running cost is around 20,000 Hong Kong dollars per month. And the facility is provided for by the government, built by the government, and they are generally disabled friendly. But as I mentioned, because the government has to control public spending, the waiting time is very long, on average 4 years. And if you are particular about your choice of OH home, even longer. So what happens to the other people who need OH homes but cannot wait that long? So they end up in the private OH homes. So when you think about private OH homes, you associate with a very high cost, but in Hong Kong, it's a different situation. And if you look at the people in the private homes, most of them are funded by social welfare. And what they do in Hong Kong is that if you are poor, that means you have little income, monthly income, and your total asset is less than 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. The total asset is less than that, then you are considered to be poor, and you get social welfare payment from the government. And if you include the high rate of disability allowance, nappy allowance, all the allowance you can get, it will amount to about 8,000 Hong Kong dollars per month. Now, so most of the people pay for the private homes with this social welfare money. So that means a lot of the private homes in Hong Kong are charging people around $10,000, and they pay it by the social welfare money. So with this kind of money in Hong Kong, is not sufficient to provide good care. It's just sufficient to give you a bed and basic care. So that suggests that the quality of care cannot be that good because it's very poorly funded. So yeah, so this is the same as before. Okay. Now that is actually all these things are developed by default. It's not really planned by the government. The private homes were never intended to be there, but just that they're filling a service gap. And the government never thought that social welfare is the means to provide private homes, but just people just manage like this. But then it turns out that this is maybe the solution for managing old people, because it's so cheap, okay? And this is a problem for OH, sort of aged care policy in Hong Kong, because the government, it would take a very brave government to change the current situation, which is seen to be cost effective. But in fact, we know that although it may be seen as cost effective, it's not good for the old people who are there. And we see a lot of suffering and from poor care. For those people who are better off in Hong Kong, they would, a very common solution for the disabled elderly is to employ full-time domestic helpers from the Philippines and Indonesia. And so that is another cost-effective solution that government can come up with. So when one pays sort of $5,000 or so per month, you have somebody that can look after old people full-time, day and night. Yeah, and if you can, if you have the space, if one is not enough, you have two. And if two is not enough, you have three. So that's how the well-off people in Hong Kong manage the elderly care. Half of the domestic helpers look after the children, and half of them look after old people. Now, in terms of healthcare, the public hospitals in Hong Kong is something that is very dear to the heart of most Hong Kong people. It's something that we are quite proud of. That is because it is almost free. Typical outpatient, specialist outpatient clinic would cost about $200 or $300, inclusive of medication for several months. And the quality of care is reasonably good. So it gives us a great sense of security. We know that whatever we have, whatever risk we have of major illness risk that we have, that we are going to be looked after, and it's going to be affordable. No matter how poor you are, you still have a reasonably good health care. And that's why the government has been building more and more hospitals, and we have big hospitals with lots of beds, and every day our A&E department is very busy. You're talking about tens of thousands of attendances per day, and so it's a major way of delivering health care. Relatively, less money goes to the primary care. About 90% of public funding goes to the hospitals, and only 10% go to the general outpatient clinics. The general outpatient clinics, you can see it down here. In the last 10 years or so, they are run by the hospital authority. The hospital authority is the organization that runs all the public hospitals in Hong Kong. And about 15 years ago, the hospital authority has taken over the general outpatient clinics too. So this has a major advantage of this is that the interface between primary care and secondary care becomes smoother. And also, even at the primary care setting, they use the same computer system, the computer record, online medical record system. So that would allow the medical information to flow freely between hospitals and the general outpatient clinics. And the general outpatient clinics, they have focused on old people. They give priority to old people, and they give priority to people with chronic diseases. So on the whole, the management of diabetes and hypertension is reasonably good in Hong Kong. But for the other kind of primary care is mostly done by the private doctors and mostly in single-handed practices. In fact, half of all doctors in Hong Kong work in the private sector, and only half work in the public sector. This is another anomaly because most of the work is done in the public sector by the 50% of the doctors. And the other 50% of the doctors, they go for the private sector, which is actually quite small. And that's why we have a problem of medical manpower. The reason why we have a medical manpower problem is because 50% of the doctors are doing private practice. Okay, so when we talk, let's come back to the issue of dementia. In 2006, we got some probably from a Hong Kong Jockey Club to estimate the cost of dementia in Hong Kong. That is probably the only attempt to measure the cost of dementia in Hong Kong. And if you consider the disability adjusted life years, the DALYs, the message here really, so don't pay too much attention to the figures, but the main focus here is that the main problem of dementia is the loss of active life expectancy. Because dementia makes people dependent and people lose their active life, but it actually does not reduce your life expectancy that much. So most of the cost is on the dependency that dementia leads to. In terms of the amount of money, so when we monitorize things and and we look at the money spent in care, again, the message here, the figures are not that important, but the main message here is that most of the cost is borne by the family caregivers. So the government is worried about the cost in OH homes and hospitals, but in fact, the cost is not that much. It's probably affordable, although it will increase significantly in the coming years, but still is still in the manageable range. But what is obvious is that the burden will be borne by the families. Okay, and a couple of years ago, Alzheimer's Disease International interviewed opinion leaders of big cities around the world to look at the dementia readiness of in the localities, and Hong Kong was included. And out of 30 global cities, Hong Kong ranked pretty low, ranked 22nd. Okay, we are lower than Japan, Tokyo, and Beijing. The main problem here is that we score pretty low in terms of government strategy and commitment. Okay, I don't think our government is committed to social services, and they do not really have much a long-term strategy. And we scored pretty low in early detection and diagnosis. Community support is actually not too bad, 6.4. Access, but access is a problem, and business by and large is not that interested in dementia at the moment. So these are the drawbacks of dementia care as people see it. When we look at the so-called pathways for people of dementia, you know, the pathway they'll experience once they've got dementia, you can see the problems along the way. So they have problem of access to specialist outpatient for early diagnosis. And once you have got the diagnosis, you have problem in access to community services. But then while you're waiting for services or diagnosis, things happen to you. You might have a fall, you might get lost, and then you can end up in hospital. But then in hospital, the staff there are not used to dementia. They do not have dementia care training. So that's why people tend to get deconditioned, so they get even more disabled and dependent after the hospital stay. And so quite a lot of them will end up in nursing homes and OH homes, the private ones that I was talking about, the cheap private ones. So over there, they do not have the resources or the training to look after people with dementia. So people get even worse when they get there. So meanwhile, the family caregivers get very stressed. And so at the end, when they give up, then the old person will get sent to the OH homes. And sometimes they are so desperate, they just send them to the A&E department. Well, over the years, the government has actually attempted to do something for dementia. Out of the many social problems that we have, they are already, paying more attention to dementia than others. So what they've done is that they give more money to the NGOs who are running CNA care attention homes. We call that means OH homes, and in recent years also daycare center for the dementia clients. So they recognize that dementia people require more care, and that's why they provide more funding for it. But then the amount of funding is not that much. And for the daycare center, they provide more space for new daycare centers if they have dementia clients. Another positive move is that they, for the last 10 years or so, for the people who are on the waiting list for the government OH homes, because they are trying to cut down on the waiting list, so they offer money, care vouchers, for them to purchase services like home care and daycare, so with the vouchers. And also in the last few years, they have started a scheme of funding NGOs to run cognitive classes, cognitive group exercises for older people with early dementia, but they have a quota of 2,000 per year, and the program only lasts for about 6 to 9 months. So you can get there to have some cognitive training, but only for 9 months. So still it's better than nothing. And 2 years ago, they started the Dementia Friends campaign, okay, and training up security guards, so that the security guards can help people so with dementia and probably help them to stop them from getting lost and trying to get away and sort of without supervision. Okay, so this is what the government has done for dementia in the last 10 years or so. Now I move on to my center, Jockey Club Centre for Positive Aging. I was invited to lead the center about nearly 20 years ago now, and it is something that is very dear to my heart too, because the staff there are very special people and everyone is very enthusiastic about dementia care. Now, the more I work in this organization, more I feel how unique we are. In that, when we look at this is the history. Back in 2000, the project was initiated by the Hong Kong Jockey Club. Hong Kong Jockey Club is in the top 10 charities of the world, and they donate over $1 billion a year on all kinds of social enterprises. So at that time, the Jockey Club recognized that there is a big service gap in dementia care. And so they came to Chinese University to invite us to develop a center of excellence in dementia care. And they approached the hospital authority for a venue. So that's how we got there. So this venue actually is part of a convalescent hospital in Hong Kong. That is where actually I work, Sha Tin Hospital. It used to be a staff quarters. And so with the Jockey Club, a major donation from the Hong Kong Jockey Club, we renovated it to become a daycare and residential care center for people with dementia. So our objective is to promote dementia care in Hong Kong by direct services, training, and research. And actually, we manage the organization as a company. And we have only got 3 shareholders. One is the Jockey Club, the other one is the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the third one, the Hospital Authority. And we operate on a non-profit making basis. So it's a business, but it's a non-profitable business. So let me show you around our center. This on the ground floor, we have a nice garden and sheltered from the rain and the sunshine, and people can do some planting there. And on the ground floor, we have a memory clinic, and actually we invite others as specialists like dietitian, podiatrists, music therapists, acupuncturists, herbal medicine people. So they come every now and then to provide direct services to our clients. And on the ground floor, we have a training center which can house over 40 people. Our main business is daycare. We have 2 floors to provide daycare. 1 floor for mild to moderate dementia and 1 floor for severe dementia. We've got 3 minivans to bring the old people to us, and we cover a population of over 3 million. The problem with this is that people have to spend a long time in the minivan. Typically, they will spend about 1.5 hours on one trip, which is a limitation of our center. And our center provides cognitive stimulating activities, physical activity, and we use a lot of computer games as well. And we provide case management for every client. And we have a hotline for the general public. On 1 floor, we have we have 17 beds, one bedded single room to 4 bedded rooms, and each room has its own toilet and shower. Before the COVID, the residents mixed with the daycare clients. So every day they will have lots of activities upstairs, and they see different people every day. And so they get a lot of stimulation. And but since COVID, unfortunately, they have to be confined to their floor and to have the activities on the floor without traveling to the other floors. A special feature of our center, the residential center, is that we run it like a hotel. People pay by the day. So it creates a lot of flexibility. So you can spend 2 to 3 weeks, but you can also live there forever. We also, in the last few years, we have this transitional care program. So people, when they are discharged from hospital, they can spend a few weeks with us to have rehabilitation before they go home. In terms of training, which is very important because we want to share our experience with other NGOs who are providing similar services to people with dementia. Over the years, we have, our staff have become very experienced with dementia care. So we are in the position to share our experience with other people and other carers. So we do family caregiver training courses. We do courses for full-time domestic helpers, and we do courses for professional and frontline workers. And actually, we for the last 10 years or so, we have an advanced diploma course under the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So we try to, bring train up professional people, and when they graduate, they become the champions of dementia care in their organization. At the center of the photo is actually this old lady there. She's nearly 100 years old now. She started with our daycare about 12 years ago. She was living alone with early to moderate dementia. She was not managing. So the son sitting next to her sent her to us, and she did very well. This is the daughter-in-law from America. And the son was very impressed by our service. But then and he said to us that, well, it's all very good that you've got a very good center, but how about the other centers in Hong Kong? So he encouraged us to have a diploma course. And also he was very generous and donated money to support the students. Nearly half of the cost is met by him. So he's been donating for the last 10 years to support social workers and other professional people to take this course. And every year we take on about 40 students. So we have a few hundred graduates so far. Another very popular course is the best practice course. Actually, it was developed by the Dementia Service Development Center at the University of Stirling. They have been doing dementia care training for many years, over 20 years. And the best practice course is one of the gems that they have developed. The idea is to train the trainer approach. So the idea is that for the nursing homes and hospitals units, they send 2 or 3 of the senior people to be trained to be facilitators. Over 2 to 3 days. And basically in the training, they are trained how to do the training. So once they get back to their own places, they run small group training, typically about 8 people. They meet for 1 to 2 hours once every 2 weeks and do it. Then they do it regularly for 6 months. And we have a fixed curriculum for them, so for the discussion. And so at the end of the 6 months, we are able to demonstrate significant change in the caring attitudes, the shift to the person-centered approach. So it's a very effective course, and it's also good for the career development of the facilitators. And the facilitators will be able in a position to provide training to the staff on a continuous basis. We have people coming from Macau, mainland China, and Taiwan, Singapore for intensive training over 2 to 3 weeks. And we collaborate with other NGOs closely, particularly those who are involved in dementia care. And we do research in dementia care. We've done clinical trials of cognitive training, mind-body exercise, calligraphy for people with dementia, and transitional care, and trials of different modes of family caregiver training, staff training. And we also helped startup companies to evaluate their new gadgets for dementia, like surveillance devices, robots, etc. And a campaign that we are proud of is over 10 years ago, we had a dementia renaming exercise. So the Chinese name of dementia is very negative, qi dai zheng, okay, very negative and not acceptable to most older people. So we had a competition for a new name, and we've chosen the name of brain degeneration syndrome, and which proved to be very popular among the media and the general public. And since then, the medical profession also have another name, which is major cognitive disorder, which is in line with the DSM, name. And we have dementia concern campaigns from time to time for the last few years. And we made a number of videos with different themes. So if you go to our center website, you can have a look at these short videos. And so this is our website. The center website is very popular. We have close to over 6 to 7 million hits per year. And we also have a recent program of post-diagnosis, dementia diagnosis program. And I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later. And in that website, we have information from family caregivers on dementia and also empowerment program for training course for the family caregivers. Yeah, we have information leaflets. Just say very briefly about 2 major courses, programs that we have had in the last few years. One is to promote early detection. We do it by developing a screening test online called EC Screen. It's designed to be user-friendly and it can be finished within 5 minutes. And the family can administer the test to the old people, even in their own home. And if they fail the test, in the program, they come to our centers, field NGO centers for MOCA and other cognitive tests, and then be seen by trained GPs for diagnosis. And after the diagnosis of dementia, they enroll into an 8 weeks empowerment program for people with dementia, and also an empowerment program for family caregiver training. The other program is the transitional care, which I highlighted before, because as I mentioned, a lot of old people with dementia, when they get into hospital, they become deconditioned. In this program, they can come to our center and stay with us for 4 weeks as a residential rehabilitation. So the hope is that they can get back home after 4 weeks and continue with us for daycare for another 3 months. So in the last 2 to 3 years, we have looked after over 150 dementia people, and over 90% of them were able to go home. So in the coming years, our center want to have a transition to be a center of excellence in dementia care. We do it by expanding our residential and transitional care. And we also hope to form an alliance with other NGOs who are interested in dementia care. Although I've been talking about what we've done in Jockey Club Centre for Positive Aging, but we have other NGOs who have done very good work too. So the idea is to form an alliance with them so that we can align our services to standardize our dementia care packages, and also standardize our dementia care training so that the quality can be ensured. And we also hope to do more in development of gerontology. The government has a special focus in promoting technology development in Hong Kong, and dementia care is, I think gerontology is one of the potential applications of technology. And also I will engage more university staff in dementia research and collaborate more with international as well as academics in the mainland. And as I mentioned, hospitals are expected to be under a lot of pressure with the aging population and dementia. So we'll hope that we can make a difference by collaborating more with the hospitals. Well, I don't have much time left, but I just want to mention 2 problems very, very briefly. So this is a photo that I managed to get. It's not easy to get any photos of nursing homes because they are usually very cagey, but it was taken nearly 20 years ago now, so the scene might be a bit better now. But at that time, people were less cagey, and that's why I was able to have this picture. So as you can see, if you live in a place like this, you don't expect very much. And also we have a problem of physical restraint. This is how staff there manage people with dementia. If one staff is expected to look after 30 to 40 residents, the only solution they can think of is physical restraint. And we have one of the highest physical restraint rate in the world. In the Sha Tin Hospital, the same problem exists in our public hospitals. And Sha Tin Hospital was no exception. And so I'm one of the geriatricians in Sha Tin Hospital. And about 15 years ago, geriatricians and the senior nurses led a very successful restraint reduction program. And we do it by education senior nursing staff round every day, and we move the nursing station to the middle of the ward. We have pressure sensors, a surveillance camera, and we lower the bed. We have electric driven beds, commode beside the bed. So with these measures, we were able to get rid of the safety vests, trunk restraints, and the fall rate did not increase. And when we looked at the length of stay after the program, the length of stay for confused people was reduced on average by 5 days. So it's a very good program. And the hospital authority has actually gave us a best team award. But unfortunately, we are unique in Hong Kong. We are the only medical unit in Hong Kong which can do physical restraint reduction. All the other hospitals say that they are too busy for that. The other major problem in Hong Kong is tube feeding. At the end of dementia, most people cannot eat properly. But in Hong Kong, the family would not let go. And most of them have to endure the suffering of tube feeding, in some cases for several years, together with physical restraint. So it's a major ethical dilemma. So a few years ago, in the Sha Tin Hospital again, we pioneered this advanced care planning, and now it's a general policy for the hospital authority to invite family to have advanced care planning for people with advanced dementia. But unfortunately, we are not doing it enough because it takes time. So, well, to conclude, the current health and social care system in Hong Kong, they are not prepared for the rising number for older people in dementia. So one can expect the system to be under a lot of stress. But then having said that, we have the final solution of cheap nursing homes. So, and the capacity of the health and social system is always limited. So from the government point of view, the expenditure can be capped somehow. So the burden of the dementia care will be squarely felt by the families. At the end of the day, the failure of dementia care will be borne by the people with dementia. They just end up very miserable and probably die earlier than can be. So how we can help? I think the priority should be to empower families, since the families will be the ones who are looking after the people with dementia. So it makes sense to help for us, to any one of us who are concerned about dementia care, to help the families to do a better job by providing information, professional guidance, and then help them out with respite and rehabilitation services when they need them, so that they do not need to send the old person to nursing homes, which is a very grim prospect in Hong Kong. And to achieve that, we need to have close collaboration between the medical and social services. And we need to empower people in working in the dementia field, in dementia care, but they are not motivated to dementia care training. We have to make it mandatory. So it's something the government may be able to do to ensure that people working in these places will have some basic dementia care training. So that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kwok, for the excellent presentation. Due to time limits, we cannot offer the question and answer. Can you please send your questions to me by email? I have the provided my email through the chat box and will reply to you by email as well. Thank you for our audience for your participation. We will have more webinars throughout the project. The next one is scheduled on 16 May 2022 with the topic of the dementia care policies and practice in Macau by Professor Mingxia Zhu from the Kaiwu Nursing College of Macau. We will send the information to you and invite you to join us in the next webinar. See you. Thank you. Bye.